Chicago has no shortage of abandoned buildings, and city records confirm that entire hotels were shuttered during the economic collapses of the 1970s and late 80s, especially on the south and west sides, where once grand properties quietly decayed behind boarded windows and rusted fire escapes. And among these was a mid-century hotel that had closed its doors officially in 1989 after repeated safety violations and bankruptcy filings. A building whose basement still contained an original freight elevator installed in the 1940s with steel doors, mechanical levers, and a manual pulley system long disconnected from the city power grid. And according to municipal inspection reports, that elevator was listed as inoperable, decommissioned, and permanently shut down, its cables locked in place, its control panel stripped of wiring, and its interior left unfinished. Yet in the fall of 2016, security cameras installed by a redevelopment company recorded something no inspector could explain, footage that was later verified as authentic by independent contractors and city IT staff, showing the elevator doors opening on their own inside a dark, empty basement at exactly 2:17 a.m., with no visible power source. The first figure who appears in the footage steps out of the darkness and into the soft infrared glow of the camera. A man in his late 20s wearing clothes that immediately felt wrong to the contractors who later reviewed the clip. Not wrong in a costume sense, but wrong in a time sense. His jacket cut in a style that had not been sold in decades, the fabric hanging stiff and unfamiliar, his shoes polished in a way that suggested a different era of fashion. And behind him are two more figures, a woman carrying a handbag and another man holding what appears to be a folded newspaper. And all three walk forward into the open elevator as if they expect it to be there, as if they have used it before. The doors slide shut, the frame goes dark for a fraction of a second, and when the elevator doors open again, the interior is empty, except for a layer of dust settled across the floor that was not present before, fine and undisturbed, as if it had been brought in from somewhere else entirely. According to records from the private firm overseeing the redevelopment, the security system had only been active for 6 nights at the time of the incident, and no one was physically present inside the building when the elevator activated. No maintenance crew, no overnight guards, no motion detected anywhere else in the structure, and the footage was not discovered until the following morning when a technician noticed an automatic flag attached to a motion anomaly in the basement feed. And what disturbed them most was not just the unexplained movement, but the timestamp, because the system logged a 6-minute gap between the moment the doors closed and the moment they reopened, despite no recorded vertical movement, no change in floor indication, and no power fluctuation in the building at all, meaning the elevator had somehow completed a full operational cycle without electricity. At this point, the story leaves official record and enters the zone of witness testimony, because 3 nights later, city police were called to the site after local residents reported voices coming from beneath the building. Voices speaking in what one caller described as old-fashioned Chicago accents, and officers found the elevator doors open again with dust across the floor and fresh footprints leading only inward but never outward. And according to the responding officer's written statement, which was later obtained through a public records request, he found a newspaper page lying on the elevator floor, yellowed but not fragile, dated April 12, 1953, from the Chicago Daily Tribune. And though the paper itself was later logged into evidence storage, it reportedly disintegrated within days under routine handling. Meanwhile, researchers who study urban time-slip phenomena began drawing parallels between this incident and similar reports from London underground stations, abandoned French rail tunnels, and even a documented 1968 case in New York, where commuters claimed to briefly see a subway platform that did not match any known station layout. And what ties all of these cases together is not disappearance, but displacement. The sensation reported by witnesses that they had stepped into the wrong version of the same place, one that felt familiar yet distant, real but out of sync. And in Chicago's case, the abandoned hotel had once hosted political conventions, traveling performers, and entire generations of working families, meaning thousands of lives had passed through that elevator over decades, creating what researchers call a memory-dense environment, a structure soaked in time. One former hotel employee, tracked down through union records, told researchers that strange things had happened in that elevator even before the building shut down, describing a recurring issue where guests would complain that the ride felt longer than it should have been, that the music playing inside sometimes did not match the era, and that on at least 2 occasions, guests exited believing they were on the wrong floor entirely. One woman reportedly panicked in 1977 because she swore she had stepped out into the hotel lobby as it looked in the early 1950s, complete with different furniture, different wallpaper, and staff uniforms no longer in use. A claim dismissed at the time as stress, but now resurfacing in a terrifying new context. For months after the 2016 footage surfaced, the redevelopment project stalled, unofficially frozen by contractors who refused to continue work in the basement. And this is where the dust becomes important, because in repeated later appearances, the same fine layer always reappeared after each activation, and lab analysis confirmed it did not match any debris found elsewhere in the building. Instead, consisting of fibers, soot, and airborne pollutants consistent with Chicago air samples from the mid-20th century taken from preserved environmental test archives, meaning the dust itself appeared to originate from another era. What happened next is only partially supported by record and partially protected by non-disclosure agreements. But 3 individuals did approach local journalists in 2019, claiming they had entered the elevator during one of its unexplained activations, describing the interior as dimly lit with warm amber-colored bulbs instead of modern fluorescents. The control panel, labeled with floor names that no longer existed, including a ballroom, a writing lounge, and a serviceman's reception hall. And according to their accounts, when the doors opened, the hallway beyond was full of people dressed in early 1950s attire, walking, talking, laughing, completely oblivious to the fact that 3 outsiders had just appeared among them. These witnesses independently describe the same unsettling detail, that no one's eyes ever fully focused on them, that they seemed to pass through the crowd like reflections moving through reflections, and each reported a crushing heaviness in their chest as if time itself had pressure, and the moment they tried to speak to anyone, the air vibrated with a low hum. The hallway folded inward visually, and they found themselves back inside the elevator, doors closed, and when those doors reopened again, they were standing in the dead basement of the abandoned hotel, hours later, with their phones registering massive time desynchronization glitches. City officials have never confirmed this encounter, but what is confirmed through property logs is that shortly after these reports surfaced online, the redevelopment contract was quietly canceled without public explanation. The building was resealed and new fencing was installed around the property with 24-hour monitoring. And today, if you stand outside the structure, you will find no address listings, no leasing information, no renovation signage, only sealed windows and a metal service door that no one seems willing to open. So what could cause something like this? Because skeptics point to electrical feedback loops, time code corruption in security systems, and psychological pattern recognition fueled by internet myth-making, while physicists studying space-time distortions note that under extremely rare conditions, closed time-like curves could theoretically form under massive gravitational or electromagnetic stress. But no such energy source has ever been identified beneath that building, leaving only the unsettling possibility that memory itself, layered across millions of repeated human movements over decades, may have imprinted something into that space, something capable of replaying not just sound or imagery, but entire moments. What makes the Chicago elevator case harder to dismiss than most urban legends is the physical residue, the dust, the timestamp gaps, the verified newspaper date, and most of all the fact that the footage itself existed, was transferred, backed up, and later removed through legal demand letters that cited no specific national security concerns, but insisted on total erasure for safety reasons, a phrase that appears repeatedly in declassified infrastructure incident files across the United States when an event cannot be categorized within existing emergency protocols. If the witnesses are telling the truth, then the elevator does not lead nowhere at all, but somewhere very specific, a narrow window of time sealed off inside a machine designed only to move vertically, and yet acting as something far stranger, a vertical hallway not through floors, but through years. And the people seen entering in the footage may have never known they left their own decade at all, believing they stepped into a normal elevator, pressed a familiar button, and returned to a world that no longer exists. And this raises the most chilling question of all, not whether the elevator still activates, but how many times it may have done so unnoticed across the past century. How many people may have walked out into a future that did not belong to them, or vanished backward into a moment that was never meant to reopen, because urban history is filled with missing persons whose last known locations were train stations, hotels, basements, elevators and stairwells, liminal spaces where movement itself becomes transition. Today, the building still stands, sealed and fading into the background noise of the city. But some nights, neighbors swear they hear the faint echo of mechanical movement beneath the concrete, a metal hum that rises and falls as if the elevator is still working deep inside the structure. And whether you believe the legend or not, the official record confirms one thing without question. The elevator moved when it could not, opened when it should not, and whatever stepped inside did not all come back out, not in the same way they entered. Maybe the elevator was a malfunction, maybe it was a hoax executed at impossible risk, or maybe it was something we do not yet have language for. But if history teaches us anything, it is that reality has always been stranger than our ability to explain it. And if you found yourself standing in a forgotten basement in Chicago with ancient elevator doors opening in front of you, glowing softly from a light that no longer belongs to this time, the real question is not whether you would step inside, but whether you could live with yourself if you did not. And now I want to hear from you. Do you believe this elevator was a glitch in reality? A layered memory trapped in steel and cable? Or the doorway to something much bigger than us? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because the most disturbing cases are always the ones where people cannot agree on what really happened. And if you are still here with me, make sure you are subscribed, because there are more places like this, more structures that should only move through space, not time. And somewhere out there right now, something that was never supposed to move again may already be opening its doors into another year.